Let it be said to whoever the new scramblers might be, our continent may be old, but our spirit is new.
Bola Ahmed Tinubu addresses the 5th mid-year coordination meeting of the African Union in Nairobi, expresses strong stance against the notion of a new scramble for Africa.
Senate denies alleged pardon of 2022 Supplementary Budget Amendment Bill.
Resolve glitches with the payroll platform immediately. Accountant General of the Federation tax IPPIS service providers.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, our focus is on the state of emergency on food security.
According to the 2022 Global Food Security Index released by The Economist magazine, Nigeria is ranked 107th position out of the 113 countries surveyed. The report indicates that Nigeria has an overall score of 42.0% emanating from all the indices used to conduct the research.
That's right, Juba. Now, in carrying out the study, attention was paid to 4 key aspects of food security, namely availability, affordability, quality and safety, as well as sustainability and adaptability. Now, it may interest our viewers to learn that the countries deemed to have high scores in food security are Finland, Ireland, Norway, France, and the Netherlands in that order. That they have total scores each of over 80%.
Now, curiously, what is interesting about these countries said to be doing well with food security is the fact that they are nowhere near Nigeria in landmass, human population, and suitable weather, water resources, among others, that support agricultural endeavors. Indeed, many of them cannot boast of a fraction of Nigeria's agricultural potentials, but yet feed themselves and also export to the rest of the world, including our country, Nigeria, earning billions of dollars in foreign exchange.
Now, perhaps it's in recognition of this sad reality that successive governments have made efforts to address hunger and food insecurity through various initiatives and policies. With just under 2 months in office, the administration of President Bola Tinubu has beamed the searchlight on the agricultural sector. Last week, the president declared a state of emergency on food security.
And while disclosing these to newsmen at the State House, Special Advisor to the President on Special Duties, Communications and Strategy, Dele Alakia, said the decision was reached after consultations with key stakeholders in the agricultural sector. He said the President's declaration contains a wide range of actions that will address hunger and boost agricultural production in the country towards ensuring that no Nigerian goes hungry.
Among other things, the president directed that all matters pertaining to food and water availability and affordability be included within the purview of the National Security Council. Now, he also bemoaned the inflationary trend on food items and directed that immediate, medium, and long-term interventions and solutions be taken to guarantee uninterrupted supplies of affordable food to ordinary Nigerians.
Now, in addition, Kisley, the immediate release of fertilizers for all-year farming cycle was also advanced, as well as the creation of a national commodity board to serve as a price stabilization mechanism for moderating spikes and dips in food prices. Also, the Tinubu administration is determined to strengthen the security architecture to protect the farms and farmers so that they can go and cultivate their farmlands without fear of attacks.
In all this, the government hopes to deploy concessionary capital and funding for agribusiness in order to facilitate mechanized agriculture in utilizing the nearly 500,000 hectares of land mapped out to be used to increasing the availability of arable land for farming, which will immediately impact food output or crop production output. Now, the pertinent question still How will these steps change the current trajectory and guarantee food security? Now, will these measures enjoy better implementation and strategy and commitment ultimately?
Well, these are more questions we shall interrogate as we take up the issues with the team of experts we have assembled on Good Morning Nigeria today as we discuss state of emergency on food security. I am Jummai Yusuf. Thanks for joining us. We are live in Abuja. And
I'm Kingsley Osadolo. It's a pleasure to welcome you to Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority from our headquarters studios. Now, before we get into our conversation for today, we'll take the highlights of the morning news. Later, we'll have business and the newspaper review. For now, let's get the highlights of the morning news. And here is Comfort Amodo. Good morning, Comfort.
Good morning, Kingsley and Jimmy. Good morning, Nigerians. The 5th mid-year coordination meetings of the African Union has ended in Nairobi, Kenya, with a charge for member nations to harness the opportunities in Africa towards solving the continent's problems. Nigerian President and Chairman Authority of ECOWAS, heads of state and government, Bola Tinubu attended the continental event for the first time.
Continues to face unprecedented crises, from the socio-economic impacts of COVID-19, a climate emergency, and the knock-on effects of the war in Ukraine. None of us need reminding that Africa played no part in creating any of these challenges.
COP27 was a turning point of tremendous magnitude because it brought home to the peoples of Africa the imperative to reconfigure our model of engagement with global and multilateral frameworks in general, and the urgency of projecting a new place, role, and voice to define Africa's contribution to global development and climate action. We are not asking for one financial system that favors us. No, we are asking for a financial system that is fair for everybody.
And still in Kenya, President Bola Tinubu has reaffirmed Africa's unity and strength as he strongly expressed stance against the notion of a new scramble for Africa. The president, who doubles as chairman Authority of ECOWAS heads of state and government, spoke at the 5th mid-year coordination meeting of the African Union in Nairobi, Kenya.
In the area of trade facilitation, ECOWAS has deployed a regional trade and transport facilitation implementation strategy. It has also launched the ECOWAS Regional Trade Facilitation Committee and developed a strategic framework for the regional ECOWAS e-commerce strategy. To improve healthy competition in the region, beside ECOWAS Regional Competition Authority, we have now become fully operational. Meanwhile, we are continuing to monitor the transition program in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Guinea. During the recently concluded summit in Bissau, we resolved to maintain our engagement with the three countries so assiduously work towards the implementation of the 24-month transition calendar agreed with ECOWAS before then. We cannot integrate Africa and attain the prosperity we seek, while our nearby brothers and sisters suffer in pain and anguish they should not suffer.
Back home, the Senate Committee on Media and Public Affairs has described as mischief reports in some sections of the media that 2022 Supplementary Budget Amendment Bill passed last Thursday was pardoned. A statement from the chairman of the committee, Senator Adeyemi Adaramodu, explains that the passage of the bill was part of the constitutional duties of the Senate to accommodate funding for the federal government's palliatives for the Nigerian public over subsidy removal and other national needs. The statement added that the 70 billion naira allocation to the National Assembly will not be paid to any legislator but will be managed by the National Assembly bureaucracy for exigent needs, such as the provision of working tools within the complex to make it conducive. Our farmers in Borno State are in serious apprehension that the cessation of rainfall for about 3 weeks now is threatening food security in that state and is gradually coming out of more than a decade-long insurgency with its attendant consequences.
Farmers in Borno are in a difficult situation as many have planted 3 times. Due to lack of rainfall, most of their crops have died. We take this as an act of God.
Yanzu muna roƙe Ubangijin Allah ya soke mana ruwa gaskiya abincin gwana suna ƙonewa.
Ko kusan shekara na 45 ban ga wannan juyin lamarin haka ba.
Now we turn our attention to the Accountant General of the Federation, Dr. Oluwatoyin Madin, who has tasked IPPS office providers to work towards permanently resolving the glitches and challenges in the payroll platform. She handed down the charge at a meeting with IPPS service providers in Abuja. A statement signed by the Director Press, Bawa Makoa, says the Accountant General of the Federation initially had engagements with IPPS service providers and other stakeholders as part of strategies to evolve permanent solutions to issues and challenges in the operations of the IPPIS. Dr. Madin said the glitches in the IPPIS is worrisome to the government, stressing that it is imperative to entrench efficiency in the operations of the payroll system in order to justify government's huge investment in the project. She said the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation is determined to consolidate on the gains of the IPPIS and will work assiduously to maintain an efficient and trustworthy payroll system for the country. And that's the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues shortly with Jume and Kinsley after this break. Stay tuned.
Welcome back. And on business news, Nigeria's non-oil export continues to gain traction as investment promotion experts commend federal government's trade policies. Let's get more from our business desk.
The non-oil export sector has been consistent in contributing to the gross domestic product, GDP. Nigeria being one of the leading producers of shea butter globally, the Nigerian Export Promotion Council (NEPC) has beamed its searchlights on the shea value chain by introducing more innovations. Consequently, the country has got certification from the European Union and the United States of America for the collection of organic shea in the wild value chain. Active participants are saying Nigeria is now positioned strategically for mega fund generation.
We are happy because what we are seeing here is going to quadruple the export of shea butter from Nigeria. It's going to increase the volume and the value of Nigerian non-oil exports. And it will dove down and cascade down to employing more hands, employing more women, providing jobs, providing economic living.
The impediment that we will have being able to enter into the niche market, like Mrs. Obidike has said, is the certificate that proves that this thing is actually organic and it has complied with all the standards. I am very hopeful that the next time I travel and there are products coming from other African countries, organic products coming from other African countries, I also see a jar of product coming from Nigeria, PRI Global Product, organic certified both for the USDA and the EU.
The global shea butter market has been projected to grow at an exponential rate from now till 2030. With business news, I'm Kunle Adeyeye.
All right, many thanks for the business news package. Up next, we'll take a look at the window pages of some of the papers we have this morning.
Newspaper reviewer Chukudi Okologbaja is seated here in the studio. Good morning, Chukudi.
Good morning, Juma. How are you doing?
Fine.
Good to see you again.
How was your weekend?
So. We thank God again for mighty mercies, so that Kingsley would leave me alone.
Kingsley was busy watching the finals of the Wimbledon.
No
I know that.
How are you?
It was a match that kept me on the edge of my seat for 4 hours plus.
It's clean shit.
Almost 5 hours.
Yeah, it was
4 hours 40-something minutes.
Really?
One of the epics. One of the epics you'll find on Center Court. No question about it. And for the first time in 10 years, Novak Djokovic lost a match on Center Court.
Are you talking about the Spanish youngster?
Yes, Carlos.
That threw his daddy in the center of amphitheater.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not quite fair. Djokovic did not deserve that.
No. Well, I mean that's what happens. Tennis.
The 20-year-old boy.
Yeah, 20. I recall last week. One of tennis great players, John McEnroe, made a comment.
John McEnroe.
McEnroe, he said,
the angry.
The way Carlos Alcaraz was playing at 20, none of the big 3 tennis players of the current generation played that way when they were 20. And the names of the big 3, we know them. Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal. And of course, Djokovic.
What about the guy whose name is spelled this way? D-J-O-R-G. Something. There was a great
John Borg.
John Borg. Yeah.
No, but that was. It's not. It doesn't belong to this
generation. It was with the John Micro.
John Borg. It's not. I just would say Ivan Lendl. You will find Jimmy Connors of a much earlier era, and so on and so forth. So it was great. So. That's what happened. I mean, he was close to tears. The same thing happened to Roger Federer when he lost the final at the Australian Open to Rafael Nadal. But the beautiful thing is, when you are having a change of guards, these are the kind of disruptions you find. But when you look at the honors board at Wimbledon, the honors board, that is to say, the names of men who have won the singles titles. Look, in the last 15 years, you will have the names alternating. You have Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal, and Djokovic sharing. And then of course once or twice you had Andy Murray. But 4 consecutive times before this loss yesterday, the defending champion was Djokovic. And he has, of course, the highest number of Grand Slams ever won. So his place in history is already cemented. I think he's just trying to get more into immortality, and then we see.
There was a guy I liked, Andre Agassi, but he didn't quite make it.
That's the coolest.
There was a gentlemanly deportment about it.
Yeah, Andre Agassi was great as well. I mean, he won 7 or 8 Grand Slams. His tenure, but his time was along with another great guy of tennis, Pete Sampras.
Yeah, Pete Sampras.
Otherwise known as Pistol Pete.
Did you ever report sports?
Of course, I was a sports commentator.
Of course.
You were?
Yeah.
Why not asking
on Radio
me?
Bender. So
with the Gareba?
Precisely.
Okay.
He gave me my first, he gave me, no, Al-Azhar came later. He gave me my first live microphone in a match involving Bendel Insurance and ACB at Ogbè Stadium.
You better return part-time. I'm serious. I'm not joking about it. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen.
Let's quickly, we have some papers to review. Let's quickly bring in the Nation newspaper. We begin with the Nation newspaper. And above the masthead, we have President said to unveil security plan, says Shatima. You find the details on page 6. Bauchi, Gombe, Jigawa launch subsidized fertilizer. Details on page 8. APC's neck holds Wednesday. Stop complaining, provide palliatives, Ganduje tells Yusuf. Service chiefs face reps panel. You find details on page 5, 8, and 10. And the headlines in the Nation newspaper, Tinubu, Africa must be active to compete globally. And with a rider, leaders pledge commitment to integration and cooperation. You find the details on page 4. Inflation nears 24% rate. That is on page 4. And at the bottom plate of the Nation newspaper, more investment in education crucial, says Obi. And the picture story, you see there are African leaders at the AU summit holding in Kenya. And the other picture story, you see there are honors for pupils. Practically that's what we have in the Nation's newspaper today.
All right. I also have the Leadership newspaper and the New Telegraph. So I'm going to select the stories that we'll be reading from the two window pages of the papers. For the leadership above the nameplate, we'll take one headline. It says, Sultan directs Muslims to look out for new moon of Muharram. Sultan directs Muslims to look out for new moon of Muharram. Below the nameplate, Serap asks National Assembly to halt purchase of 110 billion naira bulletproof cars. Now, 4 years after inauguration, multi-billion naira Barrow Inland Port rots away. This is how the story starts. It says weeds and thick trees have taken over the multi-billion naira Barrow Port inaugurated in 2019 by former President Muhammadu Buhari, even as a surging river is gradually encroaching the banks towards the port's building. Unfortunately, the story continues on page 7, and we don't have a photograph of the state of the port. I'm sure that would have helped in a better appreciation of the story. But regardless, it's a worrisome development. Confusion in excuse me, in APC over reported resignation of Adamu, who is national chairman of the party. Tinubu looks beyond military to end insecurity in North. And one of the writers says to strengthen ECOWAS standby force against terrorism and others. Bauchi, Gombe, and Jigawa launched subsidized fertilizers for farmers. 10 listed stocks dominate capital market with 25.6 trillion naira capitalization. Tsunami scare in U.S. as earthquake hits Alaska Peninsula. And from the New Telegraph, let's take some of the headlines. Below the nameplate, 70 billion naira palliative illegal. Falana tells National Assembly members. Nasarawa, tribunal admits more evidences against Governor Sule. And then IPOB to federal government. Release Kanu and sponsored criminals in Southeast. And the lead story for the New Telegraph comes with a kicker and appointments. Anger in APC as Tinubu loyalists take charge. Moment to Senate, functional refineries alone can't crash petrol price to 300 naira. Prepaid meters not upgraded by 2024 will cease to function. That's according to Kaduna Electric. I don't know what that means. Frank Nweke withdraws petition against Mba. INEC insists Enugu governorship poll free and fair. Serap gives Akpabio and Abbas, that's the Senate President and Speaker, 7 days to drop plan to spend 110 billion naira on bulletproof cars and others. Military solution won't work in Northwest, according to Vice President Shetima. Chukudi.
Thank you, Kingsley. Let me start on with what I see as a side talk. But because we respect our editors, in the Telegraph, when I hear anger in APC as Tinubu loyalists take charge, I say they've started again. I want to think that the Telegraph is sure of its findings, and if they are, I would like to say that the politics should be spared the destruction of in-party squabbles. Government should be allowed to settle down. There is work to do, if you ask me. The problem with politics in this country is that politics hardly ever gives way to governance and development after elections. For some people, it's politics, 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 till the next intense politics of election. Talking of Lagos cabal taking over is too early and maybe not necessary to the ears of those of us who are listening to them. I just thought I should poke our nose into that business. But more importantly, the chairman of the Major Oil Marketers Association, MOMAN, that's Olumide Adeosu, is saying that establishing, or rather rehabilitating the public oil refineries isn't going to crash fuel price from its current levels to 350 naira or 300 naira per liter. He was reacting to the Senate's moves to probe the oil subsidy regime all the way down to May 29, 2023, besides the call for functional refineries. He points out that Nigeria's refineries are old and that no proper upgrade has happened to them in a long time. He talks about the cracking unit, the catalytic converter and other things. He says powering the refineries alone is already a weighty cost center. So those are Mr. Doshu's observations. Now, there is nothing wrong with the Moman head's observations, but away from fixation on public refineries, and that's where the kernel of the matter is for me. One of the reasons for liberalizing the price of fuel was, and still is, the need to allow whoever wants to invest in the downstream business to be sure of breaking even and possibly making profit. So why is Mr. Doshu not bringing that aspect into contention? I am of the opinion that when individuals and corporate bodies join the effort, what happened between MTN and GLO would eventually happen in the downstream of oil business. I don't see prices staying at their current levels for eternity. I don't.
You don't?
I don't.
Yeah, because you have to ask yourself, why are we paying the current pump price that we are paying?
The aspects are not being explained to us.
Well, one of them that they bandy about is London cost. If you say London cost, it means it is coming from across the seas.
Yes.
And if it's coming from across the seas, CIF, cost, insurance, and freight, will apply. So if you don't have to bring it from across the seas, why then would you still factor CIF, landing cost, into your price of locally refined petroleum products?
The Atlantic is being unfairly bandied about.
but I find this typical of us. The story on the front page of the leadership. As I said, if they had a photograph of the deterioration of the Barrow Inland Port, that might also have
to back up the story.
Precisely. It's possible that they had a photograph and it got displaced today, I mean, for reasons that the editors can't justify. 4 years after inauguration, multi-billion naira Barrow Inland Port rots away. Barrow and Onitsha were the inland ports that were supposed to aid the haulage of goods through the waterways. And that was part of the reason, one, for the capital dredging of the River Niger, and then the maintenance dredging that was supposed to continue on and on. Onitsha Port, I don't know, up to now, you hear stories, here it's going to work, it's been commissioned, yes, we are going to come, we have been, the NEWA managing director, Mogalu, Dr. Mogalu, our guest on Good Morning Nigeria frequently, has been driving this process, been meeting with stakeholders to ensure that Onitsha Port, inland port, gets going. The problem with Barrow Port had to do with the access road. So they constructed the Barrow Port, commissioned it, no access road. At some point, I think it must have been the then Vice President, Yemi Oshibajo, who choppered to Barrow Port, and then thereafter instructions were given for the access road to be constructed, because you can't have a port and then the vehicles that are supposed to go either to take goods there or to move out goods from this, don't have access to the place. So why do we do things like this? And now it's deteriorating. By the time they get another 2-3 years, they probably would have vandalized. And it says that erosion, that the river is already eroding probably one of the buildings we cave in, and then again we vote money, and then we say, I don't know.
It will be looted. If they can loot they can remove all the irons on the second Niger bridge that people pass every day. Imagine what will happen to a place like Barrow
Port.
Yes.
You know, when he talks about it, you begin to think about majesty in solitude. If I can't access it, what's the point? Having it. You know,
it's a conversation we've had on this program on numerous occasions. You know, the dry ports, how it can be utilized, how it will help the economic viability of Nigeria. But still, it's still not working. It will reduce
pressure on the roads. Some years ago, after the capital dredging, I believe, of the River Niger, there were reports that's a ceramic factory somewhere in Kogi, and they were advertised. Part of the stories that went around them was that they were moving their products from their factory site through the River Niger, and going to different locations, reduce pressure. So when you have multimodal transportation system, you don't have this kind of headache. It's rainy season now, and I'm sure the Nation, for most of last week, was publishing horrible sites on our highways. Benin, Auchi, impassable. Auchi is virtually cut off. Ekboma is cut off. Going to Okene is a nightmare. Onitsha to Owerri, somewhere at Oba, the road is gone. And on and on. So
everywhere you look,
and more to come, because the rains have just started.
Yes. The bane of socio-economic development in Nigeria is lack of continuity.
Yes.
Thinking for a country that intends to make progress on and on must be something that has an umbilical cord you're not going to sever, you know.
Yeah.
You know, each administration should become a Siamese twin to the, you know, that's the way it should be.
Yes,
it doesn't matter what party is
continuity
in. Continuity
is
the issue.
And all sometimes you have to also ask yourself the utility for the funds that are borrowed. The other day we repaid $500 million euro bond that we took. That's to say that we are credit worthy. But if Barrow Port is critical to you and you don't have the funds, and you go and borrow. Alternatively, you use the tax credit that we are now, that the same Buhari administration designed to be sure that some of the highways that the government cannot handle on its own as it were, assigned to companies such as NNPC, Dangote to construct, and then they have a tax credit for that particular. That could also be done for Barrow Port, and then you move on. Yeah. The other, I just want to raise this very quickly, Jumai, and what is happening in Borno? They say the farmers. We saw the photo. We saw the video clips during our news bulletin that the farmers planted a bit too early. Now there are no rains, and they are praying for rain. Unfortunately, Majek Fashek is gone, so it would have been sent down the rain. But I'm just wondering, because this is part of the utility of the seasonal rainfall prediction released by NIMET. NISA deals with flood outlook. And when the seasonal rainfall prediction is released, the purpose is not just for aviation sector, also for agricultural sector.
Exactly.
And over the years, part of what they have done is to ensure that its message cascades down. Various state governments do get it, and then extension service workers then take off from that point, advising farmers on what to do
which
and
NIMET
what not to do.
has been doing continuously.
Precisely. So what happened in this case? Is it that, of course, prediction, it couldn't be 100% accurate? Is it the prediction that fell short? Or is it that the extension workers did not follow through? If they followed through, then why would farmers have planted?
It is
and
human
now their crops are
factor.
withering?
It is human factor. Some
There's a
farmers don't
disconnect.
believe in these predictions.
There's a disconnect between NIMET's activities and people who are supposed to use those bits of information to help the rural
They
farmer.
don't believe. They will tell you, no. I believe in God, and I think it's not going to happen. This is Oyiboma's, prediction. But in growing up, being born and bred in Maiduguri, we've had problems like that continuously. And when growing up, there are times when they go, gather, pray for rain, and then the rain comes at times even before leaving the venue of the prayer. But this is serious.
Even if Majek Fashek didn't join in the
yes,
prayers.
Borno is a place, bedeviled by insurgency. There's so much hunger there, and they need food. Food security is very important, and that is the reason why people have to support the initiative of President Tinubu on food security in Nigeria. That way we can feed each other and not go to sleep, hungry at any point.
Very good first steps.
Yes, very good first steps. Well, thank you, Chugudi, for coming.
Thank you, Jumai,
It's been a pleasure having you as always.
Kingsley, thanks as well.
Okay, we'll take a break now. When we return, our conversation will begin. Do stay.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. As a prompt for our conversation, which is on the state of emergency declared on food security, let's listen to this background by our correspondent, Uyemi Ajayi.
Food is an essential need of human beings, which constitutes one of the key requirements for assessing the health of a nation. Thus, a country which is unable to overcome hunger is not only considered to be poor, but also vulnerable and weak in the community of nations. Over the years, Successive Nigerian governments have come up with various economic policies which target agricultural initiatives aimed at providing food security for the nation. While some of those programs have gone a long way in enhancing Nigeria's food security, others have not met expectations, leading to the gradual increase in food prices. With a high level of food insecurity in the country, majority of the population, particularly those at the lower level of the system, continue to grapple with lack of access and unaffordability of food commodities, which results in poor nutrition that ultimately impacts negatively on the nation's productivity and health. Being one of its key campaign promises, the Bola Tinubu administration has made food security an area of focus right from its inception in line with the renewed hope agenda. True to his promise, Thursday 13th of July 2023 indeed brought a ray of hope in the agricultural sector when the government, through the Presidential Advisor on Special Duties, Communications and Strategy, Dele Alake, declared a national emergency in food security.
Now, as a direct and immediate response to this crisis, a number of initiatives will be deployed in the coming weeks to reverse this inflationary trend and guarantee future uninterrupted supplies of affordable foods to ordinary Nigerians. We will immediately release fertilizers and grains to farmers and households to mitigate the effects of the subsidy removal. 2, there will be an urgent synergy between the Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of Water Resources to ensure adequate irrigation of farmlands and to guarantee that food is produced all year round.
The President directed all matters pertaining to food and water availability and affordability and essential livelihood items be included within the purview of the National Security Council, with plans for the deployment of a number of initiatives. The government said it will work hard to ensure constant uninterrupted supplies of affordable foods to ordinary Nigerians as part of the savings from the fuel subsidy removal will be injected into the agricultural sector. Aside these, there is the plan to immediately release fertilizers and grains to farmers and households to mitigate the effects of the subsidy removal. There will also be the activation of land banks, of which 500,000 hectares have already been mapped out to be used to increase availability of arable land for farming, which will immediately impact food output as the country cannot depend on seasonal farming any longer. The Central Bank of Nigeria will, however, continue to fund the agricultural value chain, which is targeted to account for about 70% employment in the long term. As part of plans, the government will collaborate with mechanization companies to clear more forest and make them available for farming, as well as engage security architecture to protect the farms and the farmers so that farmers can return to the farmlands without fear of attacks. Now, how feasible will all these plans be? With so much investment expected to go into agriculture, what measures will be put in place to monitor the implementation and ensure that it is insulated from corruption? Will the plans eventually guarantee available and affordable food for the common man? Will Nigeria eventually become a net exporter of food rather than an importer, despite its huge landmass and active youth population? These are some questions begging for answers from guests already seated in the studio.
And to discuss the topic, state of emergency and food security, let's welcome in our studio here in Abuja, Professor Abolade Oyerunde, Dean Faculty of Agriculture, University of Abuja, and National Secretary, Entomological Society of Nigeria.
Good morning.
So regular.
Good to have you, Nigerians.
Also joining us here in the studio is Kabir Ibrahim, Member Board of Trustees, National Agriculture Foundation of Nigeria, also a regular. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, then from our Ibadan Network Center, we are being joined by another regular on Good Morning Nigeria. It's Professor Mohammed Kuta Yahaya. He's a professor of agricultural extension and development communication. Professor Kuta Yahaya, we're glad to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
And good morning, Nigerians. Pleasure to be here.
Let's begin, gentlemen, by taking a look at the whole idea, if you may, of a state of emergency being declared on food security, and therefore the presumption that we are in a food crisis situation. Is that a correct assessment? Let's begin with Architect Kabir Ibrahim, of course, who is a former president of All Farmers Association of Nigeria.
Well, the state of emergency on food security is all-encompassing. You know, we have had so many threats, or we are still having threats from insecurity. So if the emergency also involves stemming the insecurity, it will definitely go a long way in solving the food crisis. Now, it is not wrong to say that we are already in a crisis situation. So many people find it very difficult to eat now. Food stuff is very costly, and all the threats to make it continue are still there. So the decision to create an emergency situation on food is a very welcome one, and all the farmers are very happy that it is there, and the mention that fertilizers will be given to them is a very welcome idea, and we look forward to the implementation of the emergency response.
Okay, thank you very much, Architect Kabir Ibrahim. We'll come back to you because there are many strands of the state of emergency. But let's go back to Professor Kuta Yahya. We earlier introduced him. Professor Kuta Yahya, let's have your take on this. The same question I posed to Architect Kabir, namely, there is a presumption that we have a food crisis situation on our hands. Is a state of emergency an appropriate response in your opinion? And if so, why?
Thank you very much, Kingsley. And I join my colleague in the studio there in Abuja to say that this is a welcome development. And in any emergency situation, it means you have put in place all measures that will address the situation without going back. Primarily, funding and men and resources, material resources to support the emergency. And when the advisor to the president on strategy and communication, Mr. Dele Alake, addressed the press in the presidential villa, he made it abundantly clear that the entire, elaborate plan is to be supported, and the central bank will continue to play its role, and the entire value chain is well captured, and we look forward to operationalization of the implementation, where we will have tested men and women of integrity to implement, so that it will reach the ordinary citizen, and especially the small-scale farmers that account for the bulk of agricultural system or production in Nigeria, be it in crops, livestock, fisheries and aquaculture. They should be all captured in the net so that the impact will be palpable. And indeed, the support in terms of input supply and in terms of the situation that we are in, we need to have situational analysis well on the table so that we know where the gaps are, so that we don't apply solutions to where they're not needed. And I'm sure with this, it is not far-fetched that the bringing in the security architecture into it is going to help the nation, because food security cannot be divulged from national security. They are twin allies that must be addressed squarely. So therefore, I look forward to a personalization where the game changer in the entire episode will be agricultural extension system that will galvanize all the actors so that the implementation will be seamless. And I look forward to this in the days to come, where we are going to have the quick fixes or quick wins that will be immediate, medium term, and long term. Already we have a situation where 35% of the employment is accounted for by agriculture. So if the target is 70%, we need to have this structured in a roadmap that it will be actualized. Thank you.
So, Kuta, for your opening comments there, let's come back to the studio where Professor Akim Abolade Oyonde is seated. You know, for a small-time farmer like me, it was very exciting to get, you know, the news on that says there should be food security. We're going to fight, you know, to make sure that no Nigerian goes to bed hungry. How did you receive the news? And like Kabiru said, it is an all-encompassing policy. What's your take?
Basically, an hungry man is an angry man. Yes. We have to start with that. And with the removal of subsidy, the first set of people that felt so bad about it are the downtrodden, the lower help people within the country. So the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's government have to be proactive to take a decision to actually reduce the stress of Nigerians. So declaring an emergency in food security, food availability, food affordability is germane to solving the problem of the downtrodden as well as the majority of the population in Nigeria. This stems to what we have in the Sustainable Development Goal, number 2, that talk about food security as well. It means the government is responding to having a population that will be happy. Because anybody that doesn't have food on his table, the family that doesn't have sustainable food on their table is in comatose. So as the spokesman to the president has rightly placed it, that there will be provision of fertilizer, there will be provision of grain. I don't want to use the word grain, because when you use the word grain, grain means food for people to eat. Well, if we are thinking of the concept of a farmer, we'll be thinking of concept of seeds or seedling that is certified. So, but temporarily, let's take it within that concept of calling it grain, because we, the practitioner, the agriculturist, doesn't want our farmer to be planting grains. If they plant grain, they will not optimize their productivity, because it must be certified seed. But I take it within the concept that maybe the other interpretation is that is a layman's word to use it as grain. So, but it's a step in the right direction. But what I love most is having productivity throughout the year. The major gap we have in our agricultural productivity is the issue of not doing all year-round agricultural production. Because most of the time, what we only do is what we call seasonal farming for the crop people. The animal husbandry set of people and livestock managers have been able to surpass that. They produce throughout the year. But in crop, we still have this limitation because of the non-availability of adequate water or irrigation facility for production throughout the year. That's why we are having, you see that tomato will be so cheap ridiculously at some time, and after a while, it skyrocketed. And we have not gotten to the concept of farming all the year. And so now that we are saying that Ministry of Water Resources as well as Ministry of Agriculture should synchronize and join hand, it means that we can now have modernized farming where you have production all year round. If we're able to do that, the next concept that we must be prepared for is that if we are thinking of having a bumper harvest, maximizing production, you must be thinking of what is our practice or what is our plan for post-harvest handling of those crops, as well as how do we add value to what we produce. I remember we've had some experience in this country where people establish tomato paste company, but they don't have enough tomato to process because they only have tomato during the rainy season. So if we have an all-year production where you maximize, the first thing I think the government needs to add to this document is how do we do post-harvest handling of this crop to increase the shelf life of our commodity. For example, now when they produce tomato, the fresh one will be transported up to Lagos, throughout Nigeria. You see most of those perishable commodity close to 50% get spoiled. Now we are having a section. Now we are having production of watermelon and a host of others. Now, most of what we are producing, so we should be thinking of the concept of how do we add value to what we are producing, and within the value chain, so that we now have commodities that product that we produce from the excess, so that during the off season we have something to eat. It's not new. When you go to Bible or the Quran, the story of Joseph captures that. If they can think along that line since then, I think we have better technology now that we can adapt to have a long-lasting, affordable, and available food.
All right, Professor Oyerinde, thank you very much for the points you have raised. And by the way, you were talking about tomato paste manufacturers in Nigeria. One of the commonest complaints by a regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria, Chief Eric Umofia, who is in charge of Erisco Foods, it's not just the availability of raw tomatoes or fresh tomatoes. It is the fiscal policies that enable the importation of tomato puree from Asian countries into the economy. And it says that part of the strategy is obviously dumping, which means that you raise the cost of local production and then you make it quite difficult for local producers to equally access the market. But I want us gentlemen to take a step back, because when a state of emergency is declared, we also have to ask ourselves, where have we been through this route before? I'm asking this question advisedly, because if you recall, during the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari, there was a time food prices went up astronomically. And the president directed that grains should be released from the strategic reserve. I think Kete Kabir probably had you on that conversation, along with Professor Abba Gambo, that grains should be released from the strategic reserve. And when you have an emergency, one of the immediate responses would be, how do you depress the escalating prices? In other words, you must have a storehouse from where you go and then pick up. Outside of Abuja, that's somewhere in the Federal Capital Territory, on the way to Lokoja, you have silos. Outside of Kebbi, the capital of Kebbi State, 100,000 tons capacity you have there of silos, probably the largest in the country, and in different parts of the country.
And
but
the way to Damboa from Maiduguri to, you see the silos.
But Architect Kabir, what is in those silos?
Well, I would talk about a number of things here, and I don't want to argue with the Federal Ministry of Agriculture, but I wish you had the Director Strategic Grains Reserve to tell you what is in the silos. But what is important here is there is a decision now to create a state of emergency on food. The food system should be looked at in all its ramifications. And I believe there are about 6 issues that we must interrogate. The first one is the implementation, monitoring and evaluation of whatever policy we have in place. We must also appoint people who know what to do and hold them accountable for whatever is done in the system. 3, every actor in the agriculture space has to work in synergy with every other actor. We should not work in silos. 4, all the MDAs that have anything to do with agriculture should have a synergy so that whatever monies are placed in anybody's hand for agricultural work should all coalesce to do one thing. 5, all farmers and farmer associations, by whatever name code, should work together and should speak to government with one voice. And the president should always be at the top of proper briefing on milestones and attainment within some given timelines. I.e., if you say there is an emergency on food security now, the announcement was made on the 13th. 3 weeks from that day, the president should look at what has happened. How far have we gone? What have we started? Hold anybody who fails to do any of these accountable. In fact, remove them, put other people. And before you do the implementation of anything, have a round table, including all stakeholders, and let them talk and tell the truth. It is quite one thing to listen to a briefing from one source without getting the other view. I'm saying this with the benefit of hindsight. There was a time all the farmers were being enumerated, or were supposed to be enumerated. Money was set out for the enumeration. We went to the office of the Chief of Staff for a meeting and then an appraisal of the scheme. As president of farmers, I didn't know it was going on. I said so. There was a governor who was also the governor of a state, an agrarian state, who also didn't know. So I remember the Chief of Staff said, whatever methodology the people in charge put looked very good, but it was not going to be accepted until verified, because it reminded him of Sol 3 that was between Gorbachev and Reagan, that Gorbachev wanted Reagan to sign. And Reagan said, yes, it looked very lofty, very good, but that the United States was not going to sign until it was verified. Today, I'm not sure that we know the number of farmers. Let's say planting maize, rice, or doing poultry or anything. How can we plan for that when we don't know their numbers? Now, coming back to the whole thing, while it is good and it is very welcome for us to have an emergency on the food system, it is also vital that every aspect of the food system be looked upon. I have not seen much attention being paid to the livestock sector. If you have food security, it means that you have the right kind of food at the right kind of time that you want to eat it. It is affordable to you and it is nutritiously balanced. If there is no protein in what you eat, I don't think there is proper nutrition. So we will be talking of nutrition security above everything else. Now, coming to government now, at the point we are, it is very, very germane for government to understand that the situation we are in now calls for emergency in everything. The appointment of anybody to contribute to the success of the government of Bola Ahmed Tinubu should be done on merit and should be monitored and evaluated every part of the way. After 100 days, we want to see a round table putting out all achievements made. Food security is very key to development in all sectors. If you have food security, you will be able to go to the moon. If you don't eat good food, you will not think beyond your bedroom. But if you don't worry about the next meal coming and that it is also going to be very good, you will be able to think outside the box. Nigeria needs to do that. I mean, just a few years ago, China was grappling with a with a rising population and a lot of poverty. Today, they're in the first world. Look at Brazil. Until recently, Brazil was referred to as a third world country. Today, we are even looking at Brazil to get mechanization for our agriculture. Look at India. When I was in school, in fact, in my early days, I used to speak with an Indian accent when I speak English, because most of the teachers were either from India or Sri Lanka. Ghanaians were always washing our cars. When I go to the car wash, it's Ghanaians. They are all back to their countries. Nigerians are looking for job. Nigerians are looking for food. It is timely to have an emergency on food security. We will have to work very hard to get food sufficiency before attaining food security. And the work is everybody's work.
Thank you very much for the points you have raised. But we also need to clarify that the emergency covers three broad areas: immediate, near-term, and then long-term. Measures that would need to be implemented across board to ensure that ultimately Nigeria becomes food secure. But it's on the immediate aspect that I'm referring to, so that we know precisely what we have done before and what we didn't quite get right. I'm happy you raised the point about a director or whoever is so designated to be in charge of the strategic reserves, because at that time food prices didn't quite come down, because obviously there seemed to have been very little in the silos. And my question is going to Professor Kuta Yahaya. Professor Kuta, look, what has happened? I know we can blame insecurity, we can say X, Y, Z. Grains they are the wonder crops that a country or a people or a civilization must first have before other things, can get added onto it. I don't want to say that our silos are empty, but I would imagine that in the immediate term, if prices are rising, master bakers are threatening now to also increase the price of bread and other confectionaries derived from wheat. If grains are available, these are the first things that you push out. Have we managed that aspect properly? And what then should the state of emergency implementers look at in this particular regard?
I would say that you cannot roll out a policy of this magnitude if you don't have background information. I'm sure those in charge of the grain reserves have properly briefed government on what is in the stock. I know we have a huge grain reserve in Mina also, and in the times of emergency like this, they release grains across. You see trucks, trawlers taking grains out of the reserve. But my own perspective to all this is that we are not going to be operating on a tabula rasa. There are a lot of things that have worked well for Nigeria. And I'm one of those who are optimistic that if you look back and inward, we can address these problems without fear of contradiction. Number one, we have 11 river basins, and some of them are working very well, but not maximized. So this is our potential, this is our opportunity. I will give an example of Tunga Kawa irrigation scheme near Ushishi in Niger State. It has capacity for irrigation to cover 10,000 hectares of land. But as at the last count, they have not maximized more than 30%. And in those 30%, the farmers in that enclave cultivate rice 3 times a year. All year round, there is no dull moment in that community. And I remember NTA, in one of his programs, covered prosperity limitless in that community, where there were about 100 marriages consummated in one day. Young people, because of prosperity that they have achieved, they translated into marriage. And many people in that community own motor cars, vehicles. In the first production line, the rain-fed will, after 3-4 months, then the stock of the harvested rice will sprout on its own again. And they will go and harvest that one. Then when the dry season sets in, they will go and then remove the whole entire land, clear it again, and plant fresh rice that will be supported through irrigation. And there is no dull moment in that community. And I know the Tiga irrigation scheme in Kano is doing excellently well in terms of dry season agriculture. Therefore, let us look at every location we have these potentials, and we can harvest that. We had tried Fadama 1, Fadama 2, Fadama 3+, and it worked in the enclaves where they were adopted. We don't need to go and reinvent the well. We just dust off how did Fadama make it. We can now support them to reactivate them. And currently, the Rural Asset Mobility Project, RAMP, is a success story. It started with only 5 states. And the successes of those 5 states gravitated towards expansion to 13 states. And by this moment, it is expanding to the 36 states because every state wants to key into it. And it is multi-pronged approach where you're talking about rural access, marketing also is included, so that farmers are integrated into that program. So if you have any funding support in this project, because of the well-established structure of monitoring, evaluation, assessment, implementation manual to guide everybody in that space, you can direct money there and you'll be sure you get the result. In the same breath, the food security programs that we have adopted in the past were implemented through civil service approach. With due respect, you cannot continue in an emergency to depend on bureaucracy to run such kind of initiatives. As my brother Achille Kabiru said, we need an implementation plan that can be monitored, that will be accountable, and all the stakeholders in the entire agricultural space, from the researchers, because when I look at the presentation of the special advisor, he's also talking about supporting agricultural research. And there are so many research institutes doing well with a lot of prototypes. And I'll give you one example. I was at an international conference in 2002, and I challenged my colleagues from Malaysia. I said, you came and stole our oil palm in Benin, Naifo, which Kingsley are very familiar with. He said, no, Doctor, what happened is that Malaysia has a counterpart research institute like NIFO, as far back as 1956. So they used to have exchange programs. Anytime Nigerians develop new cultivars, they invite their expert to come and share with them the knowledge. In the same way, if they also achieve certain things, they invite Nigerians to come. But the game changer in Malaysia was not only the cultivar. He said the government has a development plan that every year it will expand oil palm plantation by 10,000 hectares. Government will end up clearing 10,000 hectares. Instead of 10,000 hectares, will clear 100,000 hectares for the farmers. And that continued until the entire land space of Malaysia was covered by oil palm. There was not any space left. And as at that time we were discussing, the entire oil palm plantation in Nigeria was no more than 10,000. So therefore, now that we give kudos to President Babangida when they established NILDA. NILDA was to fill that gap, clear massive land for prospective investors in agriculture. And it was reactivated recently, but we have not felt the impact. But the new direction that the advisor said there will be 500,000 hectares of land to be cleared as holding, it will go a long way to assist would-be investors. That will be additional prospect. Mechanization component of it. I have made it clear that when you go to Nigeria Center for Agricultural Mechanization in Ilorin, you weep for Nigeria because these people are producing prototype small, equipment that can support agricultural system, but they are left on nobody is aware of what they are doing. So I believe if they are integrated and supported to go into mass production, they can produce equipment that can support our production system. Not only heavy duty tractors alone, small mechanizations. We have watched what China has done. We are seeing all those prototypes running online in the social media. We can integrate them. And you remember, while we're all in school, we're using hoes and cutlasses to cut grasses. But now, you have small equipment motorized that you can use, which will reduce labor, the back pain associated with it, and other health hazards. In the same breath, in the entire agricultural system, you have extensive coverage in the entire agricultural value chain. And the beauty of it is that if you want to invest in agricultural value chain, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD, is already supporting value chain development in Nigeria. So any funding, any support system can be tailored towards the state that are already into it, and you can expand nationwide. So that you don't need to go and put money somewhere that you don't know it will be, people don't know what to do with it. You can use this template, and it's going to help Nigeria out and put food on the table of an average Nigeria on continuous basis. I will still repeat, we need the quick wins, we need the quick fixes that will bring food readily available, and that will, in a way, support farmers. In Niger State in those days, we used to have what we call buffer stock. When the farmers are producing mass, we go to the market to go and acquire all those grains and put it in a buffer stock. And when there is scarcity, we release it to wards and local governments so that it will cushion down the effect, so that the prices will go down. I have been very familiar with that experiment, and it worked in Niger State. And I believe we can expand it nationwide, so that we have guaranteed minimum price, so that farmers are not losing. Yes, produce, we will buy from you, and we will now put it in our buffer stock and release it at the time needed. So this time around, whatever we have in our buffer stock across the states, we can bring it to cushion the effect of the prices on the common man. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Kuta. Let's now return to the studio where Professor Akim is seated. I'm throwing my question to you. This is an ongoing conversation for years on food security in Nigeria, from the Green Revolution to what we have today. And President Tinubu has said they've taken steps to give effect the order, and the number of initiatives would be deployed in the immediate, medium, and long-term plans and goals. And this can be achieved through markers. So what are we talking about here?
What we had before with the previous government, agric in Nigeria, if we trace it even pre-independence, we will see that we have so much achievements which we lost with the advent of oil. The fact remains that our economy has always been sustained with agricultural practice. And we should understand that we are so blessed. The country is blessed that we have mammoth of resources from agriculture. We are still, all this that we are discussing is still the green economy. We have not talked about the livestock economy like what Architect Kabiru has said. We have not talked about the blue economy. We have our waterways, the river, the stream, the ocean, so much resources, the maritime. We are not even thinking along that line. Most of the fish that we eat, we import them. So the fact remains that the major thing is we have to go back to the basics. Grain reserve is not new in Nigeria. The issue of regulation of price is not new. We have most of these things, but all our agencies that are involved in the practice of agriculture should know that the major thing is the key performance index, which is the KPI, which is not starting this project that is the major thing. But what are we going to achieve with this emergency that we have declared? Professor Kuta raised something that is very important. The issue of living the development or solving the food problem with bureaucracy practice will never work. We have so many. If you go and read the issue of policies on agriculture in Nigeria, you'll be shocked that we have so many policies that we have designed, and some countries, I will not mention their name, came here to come and copy those same policy, and they are doing well. It's working for them. It's working for them. So it means that when NISA started, some other country came to Nigeria and copied that. It's working for them. And these are smaller countries that doesn't have the human capacity, that does not have the resources that we have. We have close to 1/3 of the African land that you can use to cultivate in Nigeria. We have nearly about 1/3 of the African population. It means we have markets. So the fact remains that the major thing is about the policy, which we have at hand now, but the major factor is all the policy that we have. Do we factor in monitoring and evaluation into it? If the grain reserve that we are talking about, fortunately I pass through that grain reserve every day, morning and night, because my house is very close to the place. There was an ugly incident there that one of it is burning. So when I saw that, I said, this is one of the problems that we have in Nigeria. And what is the problem? That technology was imported without domesticating it. You know, if you have a technology and you want it to work, that was what China was able to do. I was in China for agri-mechanization in 2015. And one of the presenter told us that, as at that time, China, they are still imitating, that they will start innovation in 2018. But Nigeria, we don't want to imitate. We just want importation, unnecessary importation of goods that we can produce domestically into the country. Whenever people talk about Malaysia, what I usually tell people is that we are the ones that have not established a working system. Working system does not mean you are a director, you are a minister. It's all about who do you have on the team? What are the check and balances? What are the evaluation that you are doing for them? If somebody could not deliver, you remove the person. Nigeria is so blessed that's why you see when Nigerians go out, they do well, because there's a working system. But we have resources. We have the likes of the architect, we have other professors, we have people that are well groomed to take charge. But when appointment comes, the calibers of those people will not be there, because we'll now be thinking of a political undertone. So this one, if we want to achieve it, we must remove politics from it. That's the first thing. We have to remove policies from it. We have to know that we have a target, and the target is to solve the immediate and the medium and the long-term problems of Nigeria. Well, the immediate one now is let's relieve those grains within the granaries. Let's release it provided there are grains there. But at least the one I said burnt, I know there is grain in that one. Because immediately you start perceiving the odor, you know that grain is burning. So the fact remains that
there was no fire service nearby.
That's why I said the technology was imported without domesticating it. I consulted for somebody that will go and import poultry, fog system poultry from US. After a while, the birds started dying because you know the temperature in US is different from the temperature where it's using in Anambra. So I was now complaining when I got there. I said, how will you not domesticate? How will you not integrate a technology that you are bringing in? At the end, he has to remove all the fog system and now introduce a water sprinkling system to it. That was when it works. But what we are saying is, we are not saying we should not bring technology in, but we have enough experts within the country that can domesticate the affair. Like what you raised with the income. You see, income has so many things that they've developed, and the major thing is, I was there one time, I was cracking a joke with them. I said, look at it. If we are in income and you're using cutlass and what else you want to happen to the other farm? So whosoever is heading any of our agri agencies, parastata, or whosoever is an actor within the value chain should know that the best we can do to this country is to believe Nigeria first. If we're able to do that, whatsoever resources that they have given for us to develop, whatsoever component we are handling, if we do it better, there will be food for all. But now, let them release those grain and let's see how we can plant throughout the year so that and we can now have a scheme for post-harvest handling and adding value to whatsoever we produce.
Professor Akim, thank you so much.
Yeah, Professor Yorin, I know we're going on the break. I just wanted to draw attention to part of what Professor Kuta said with regard to NIFO, a place I'm very familiar with, Research Institute. Actually, in the earlier part of the existence of NIFO, it was actually called WIFO, which was the West African Institute for Oil Palm Research, before it later became NIFO. And at the time we visited the place fairly regularly. We used to go there to play tennis, and it was nice. It was Dr. Ataga, who was the director of NIFO at the time. Dr. Ataga, I'm sure we all remember, his son was the one who was murdered in Lagos a couple of years ago, for which there's an ongoing trial now for that particular incident. So, do you mind?
Yeah, we'll take a break. When we return, the conversation will continue. Don't go away. Yeah, welcome back to Good Morning Nigeria. We still have our guests seated in the studio. We've been discussing, emergency on food security in Nigeria, which is something that needs to be looked into. Let me bring in Kabir Ibrahim, member board of trustees, National Agricultural Foundation of Nigeria. This is a policy that is supposed to reach the foundation of farming in Nigeria. It begins in the local government areas, and then state governments must be fully involved. The policy also talked about synergy between the Ministry of Agriculture and Water Resources so that they can maintain, off-season farming across the country. But all this policy is on paper right now. Its implementation is key. How can the farmer in the village be able to understand this policy and key into it?
Well, many ways. There are many ways in which you can sensitize the farmers. In the Apex Association of Farmers, this information has already been sent up to all the wards of the country, because AFAN, for instance, is available or is present in 774 local governments of Nigeria, in all the 36 states plus FCT. Now, I want to make a clarification. The federal government is just supposed to create the enabling environment. If over-reliance on the federal government is the bane of agricultural productivity in Nigeria, I am glad that Professor Kuta alluded to what is happening Niger State, for instance, in terms of rice generally. What we should do as a nation is, we have 6 geopolitical or geo-agricultural zones, 6 of them. Now, look at the staples in each of the zones and scale that up. Because as he was talking of rice, I still go back to what I have been telling you here on NTA, that rice is not necessarily the staple all over Nigeria. But out of commission and omission, we have made it so. If, for instance, you go to the south-south and scale up the production of what is commonplace, what is staple there, the people of the south-south will not complain. Go to the southeast, go to the southwest, go to the northeast, go to the northwest, and everywhere else in Nigeria, be in the north central, and make sure that you put premium on those things that are staple there. You will easily optimize them. But if you give a blanket go ahead for Nigeria to do this, it will not necessarily work. It may remain on paper. Let me tell you, let me go back and be patient with me. In the last administration, many milestones have been achieved in terms of legislation. When, in fact, agriculture is now on the front banner because of the agriculture promotion policy that came about in 2015. The Anko Borrower program of the CBN sprouted from there. The implementation of the Anko Borrower program should be reappraised and done properly so that a set of farmers benefit from it, pay back, and another set benefits. It has to revolve. Because no country, I mean, Nigeria does not have the resources to give every farmer support to be able to scale up his or her production. We must do that. We must also look at the fact that the all-year-round agriculture that we have been talking about is not limited to the synergy between the Federal Ministry of Water Resources and Federal Ministry of Agriculture. It should also be in synergy with all the state governments and local governments in Nigeria for it to work. You will recall that there are many dams, and I had the privilege of having a good Tuesday night live discussion here with the Federal Ministry of Agriculture, represented by the minister himself, when at the beginning he said Nigeria is poised to expand its damming capacity. That is, be able to actualize the irrigation canals and all that all over the country. I don't think that has been done. That desire should have been fixated to a given time frame and implemented to be sure that it happens. Whatever the Ministry of Agriculture has committed to doing should be checked and should be confirmed to have been done. Whatever monies that have been applied to any aspect of agriculture must be looked at and confirmed to have been deployed for that purpose. Every farmer in Nigeria should be incentivized to do agriculture as a business, so that the farmers will be the ones asking questions. Like, look, you said this is a policy is going on. How do I benefit from it? The benefit I'm getting is not sufficient. I cannot even feed my family. So, look, change it. Report. Let us have feedback from the states, from everywhere. Try to agree on what you want to do with every state of the federation, regardless of it's not being a part of your government, that is in your party. Because, you know, we convene the Council on Agriculture every year. The purpose is to be able to get all the ministries of agriculture in Nigeria to commit to the implementation of the policy for that year. The communique should include everything and every aspiration and expectation of every player in that. So every state, regardless of whether you are an Abga state, whether you are this state, we have a common desire to get our people out of poverty and to make Nigeria food sufficient. If you do that, you get somewhere. Now, a number of achievements have been made. A number of acts have been, there is the act, it's passed into law in Nigeria in 2022, just before Buhari left office. It is called the right to food for every citizen. So we cannot be talking of this level of non or difficulty in feeding ourselves. It is a right. The government should not do it because it wants. It is a right of every citizen to have access to food, and good food for that matter. We have the Seed Act. Professor alluded to the fact that some people are planting grains. There is no room for grains. I had been a member of the NASC, and the law is very clear. Seeds, certified seeds, are the ones to be used by every farmer, and farmers are sensitized to even discern what is good seed and what is bad seed. There is also the Fertilizer Act. You cannot sell anything in the name of fertilizer without it being certified as fertilizer. Okay. So many things are there. Okay, and then there is the National Agricultural Development Fund, which will be like the other funds that we have, like TED Fund and all those. So all our monies that we are getting from every aspect or everyone that has cross-cutting issues with agriculture, a percentage of it will be paid into a common pool, and that pool will be used.
Architect Kabir, thanks a lot for the further elaboration, because there are issues arising from what you are explaining. That's why I'm going back to Professor Kuta Yahaya. Look, as Professor Kuta Yahaya also indicated, we have milestones already accomplished. But unfortunately, we are having a food crisis situation, and so there's a state of emergency being declared on food security in the country. Which then leads us, because you have, gentlemen, you have also talked about this, namely the question of implementation. Professor Kuta Yahaya was firm to say, look, and of course reaffirmed by Professor Yorinde, that this isn't a matter that can be left to the bureaucracy. But Professor Kuta, how do we make all these connections amongst the existing pieces of legislation, among the manifold institutions and agencies that operate in the agricultural space? Who takes charge, and who therefore excuse me, should be held accountable in terms of the timelines that should be set for all of these purposes? I recall, and I'm sure you will also remember this, that during the previous administration, I'm not quite sure what the exact nomenclature was now, there was a committee headed by the then Kebbi State governor, and the Jigawa state counterpart was the vice chairman. I think it was on food security also. Yeah, it was the Bagudu. He was in charge, and then the Kebbi was in charge, and the Jigawa was deputy. And in Kano, which you are also very familiar with, the then governor Ganduje produced quite some landmark achievements with regard to seeking to revitalize livestock production. So, but under the state of emergency, there is no cabinet yet, and you have also cautioned that, look, don't leave this in the hands of the bureaucrats. Do we have a sense that the subnational entities have also been captured as part of the implementers, or at least voices to guide the implementation?
Very much, Kingsley. I am very happy that you raised this. The committee you are referring to of Governor Bagudu and Governor Badaru, it was the National Food Security Committee established by the present administration. They were like ad hoc committee that will, bypass this bureaucratic bottleneck and get the issues addressed. And they did excellently well. And I can tell you that Governor Ganduje, I was privileged to be one of the members of in fact, I was the coordinator of the technical committee of the National Conference on Livestock Reforms in Nigeria, supported by the Kano State government. And Professor Jega was the chairman. We came up with a robust master plan that would be the game changer in the Nigerian livestock industry, mitigate conflict, and possibilities agenda that will stop the hemorrhage of the massive importation of milk into Nigeria. About 100 billion was committed at a point of study within 3 months into Nigeria. And we have the potentials demonstrated by Sabore Farm in Yola, demonstrated by L&Z in Kano, demonstrated by WAMCO in Shaki in Oyo State, and a host of others. So I believe that what we need now is an emergency committee that will address these issues, and they report directly to Mr. President. Because in every emergency, Mr. President that I know, that I'm very confident, will not want anybody to put him to shame. He will not want to fail. So if we set up an emergency committee that will address all the issues squarely, because it's a robust agenda, and before the ministers come on board, they will key into it. We cannot wait. We need food on the table of an average Nigerian. And all the issues raised, an emergency committee that will operationalize implementation plan, and this committee should be made up of all the stakeholders in the Nigerian agricultural system, from the Research Council to all farmers and to existing entities. Like when the World Bank was supporting agricultural development, I wanted to come to that before you raise this issue, Kingsley. The moribund agricultural development projects across the 36 states and FCT, they are lying comatose. They could be reactivated in the wake of this emergency. They all have their network across the entire space of the system in every state, from the state zonal headquarters to the zonal level, to the ward level, and to the cells in every local government where you call the VEA, where you have village extension workers. They could activate it immediately, where you now have what we call PMU, Project Monitoring Unit. It started with FACU in Ibadan, where you used to have Professor Falusi, later Professor Mijindadi, and then you have all the people who participated in that club, like Dr. Yebanji. They're all alive. They could be called back for this emergency. Dr. Yebanji, you can be invited, and many others. How did you do it before? They can advise government without even anything. They are still active. They can assist. They'll give you a roadmap so that nobody reinvent the wheel. And I'm talking to you, if you have a project monitoring unit under the presidency on this emergency, nobody will joke with it. No any bureaucrat will sabotage it. Nobody will tamper with the resources that are made to go to the grassroots and arrest it. So I believe this is the game changer for Nigerian agricultural system. And in case of emergency, this is how you capitalize on it.
Let's come back to Professor Hakeem. You know, after the farming and everything, it goes to the market where people buy. And the policy also says there's going to be a national commodity board to review food prices. Is it feasible?
No, it's feasible. You know, as at 1985, there was a commodity board. Yeah. So that's why we are saying we are not doing something that is new. Unlike what
we should constitute this board,
or like what Professor Kuta spoke about, the issue of our ADPs, agri development projects. We still have staffs there. Most of them are they are Haidu, because immediately the issue of the World Bank money finished, there was no sustainability plan for that project. Okay. That's why you have staff, there's no provision for their management and their activity again. So these are things we can quickly reactivate. But I would love to start with what architect spoke about. There's what we call comparative and competitive advantage. Every part of the country, the agroecological zone, have where we have comparative and competitive advantage. So if we focus on that, the people already, they are into that practice. We'll just look at how do we boost their capacity. If we boost their capacity, they are not new. For example, sorghum, millet in the north, and some wheat within the northeast enclave. Some people are within the Lake Chad basin. People are planting wheat. So it means it's not new to them. I eat wheat that I eat is from that region. They even have the one that they call local and the one that is foreign. Yeah. That local even does better. And it has a very good color. It's not as dark as the foreign. So these are things that we already have our people doing it. What we need is to make them to have a sustainable environment, to build their capacity, to ease the practice. Because majority of them that are producing this, they are producing it within their own capacity, within their own fund, within their own. If they now have some source of assistance from government, whether tractorization, most of the countries of the world that grow in agriculture do subsidize tractorization or mechanization for their products. You don't allow a farmer that is a subsistence farmer to go and do what? To go and buy a tractor of 8 million. No. You can have them in cluster. You can have collation center. Cluster in the sense that when the architect was speaking about...
Did you say collation center?
Collation center for the product.
Okay, not election.
Collation center for the product. Immediately you form them into cluster or a cooperative. When they produce, they know that there's a collation center where they pick those commodities from them. It means they will not be sold at the farm gate, because now what is happening presently is that people go, they even buy the commodity, the product on the farm. They will pay them peanuts and buy, and immediately they do that, the farmer is at loss. Well, if the farmer knows that after I produce, there is a government component of it that picks this at a good price, the farmer will be willing to produce more. So the fact remains that the bureaucratic setting that we are using to handle our agriculture that's why we're in this problem. The likes of the farmers group, this morning I was thinking about this concept. And this concept is this. What is the role of our traditional leaders within our community? Before we even talk about local government. Most of these subsidized product that we give to the farmer, where even the farmers group doesn't have access to it. They don't even know about it. Afan and others do not know about the implementation. I remember one time we were planning to have a national data with late Abaruma, the national data of people that are involved, not only farmers, within the agricultural value chain. Before we lost them. That is the beginning of this. Because now that the government is talking of this emergency, government want to be proactive, government want to assist. Who will the government assist? Is it the portfolio farmer? Is it the political farmer? Because you must actually know who are the actors within the value chain. So for us to implement that...
We're getting pressed for time. I think these are some of the issues that Architect Kabir also mentioned. But this is an ongoing conversation because there are many legs that we still haven't touched. We have talked about the commodity boards. Why did the military president, Babangida, scrap commodity boards in the 1980s? I mean, was it one of those IMF prescriptions, through the back door? Why were those boards scrapped? And now that we want to get back to those boards again, what is it that we need to get right? So, Jumai, I think we're pressed for time. We'll, of course, hope that our guests will oblige us when we do invite them. Yes.
We really have to go. Professor Akim Obolade Oyunde, Dean, Faculty of Agriculture, University of Abuja, and National Secretary, Entomological Society of Nigeria. It's been a pleasure having your insight into this policy. Kabir Ibrahim, Member Board of Trustees, National Agriculture Foundation of Nigeria, and former President of Farmers Association. Thank you for coming.
I would like to come in. I'm not former president of AFAN.
You still are?
I am still the president of AFAN. Some people got judgment and we have appealed.
Okay.
And the matter is still there in court.
Okay.
I am still the president of All Farmers Association of Nigeria.
Okay, that's good. And from our Ibadan studios, we have Professor Mohammed Yayakuta, Professor of Agricultural Extension and Development Communication. Gentlemen, we thank you for your contribution to this conversation. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Sports Update is next. And that's Good Morning Nigeria for today. Join us again tomorrow for another edition. I am Jummai Yusuf.
Look after yourselves. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.